Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Extraterrestrials Part 4 Note. This section generally deals with the existence of various extraterrestrial civilizations, their histories, societies, cultures, behaviors, technologies, etc. An excellent summary of the UFO, extraterrestrial phenomenon, is given by Billy Meier in his article Extraterrestrials, found in Contact Report 257. Drawings and photorealistic renditions of some extraterrestrials may be seen at the end of Contact Reports 830 and 836. A list of extraterrestrials who have contacted Billy Meier can be found at the FIGU website. Contact Report 244.
Then I would like to know which planets you are responsible for as Jishwish.
For Era, for Earth, and for a planet called Amataban. The planet Amataban is in a system of our space-time structure, which we call Harkonnen, and which belongs to our Federation. Quetzal is responsible as Jishwish for 2 planets in the Harkonnen system. I assume that something similar will appear in our Federation, namely among a peoples who bear the name Demonair. These Demoners are still very underdeveloped and are cared for in an impulse-based manner by the powers of our Federation. The human beings of this people have gotten very badly out of the good human nature to a great extent. Murder, lies, and fraud, etc. are part of their agenda, but also every form of inhumanity and crime. As a result of these things with the Demoners, it has become common practice in the languages of certain of our Federation peoples that only the word Demonair is used, or demon, when there is talk of degenerated forms of life or degeneration.
Contact Report 246.
My task was to create a colony on an uninhabited planet called Cathan in the space area IDAM, known on Earth in this space-time structure as the Spiral Nebula NGC 2997, at a distance of 45 million light-years. I was also busy in the space area Nosir, where we also founded a new colony. This also happened on an uninhabited planet called Nasadan. The space region Nosir is a galaxy which is 16 million light-years away from the Sol system in this space-time structure, and which is referred to as M83 in earthly astronomy science.
Then, the Spiral Nebula and the galaxy are not in your space-time structure, if I have understood correctly. However, the question remains as to why you are founding colonies if you have enough space on your planet, since you do not tend towards overpopulation, as is the case on Earth.
The colonies were founded to separate 2 enemy races that threaten to destroy each other on their home planets by waging endless war against each other. Capable of both nuclear technology and the first spaceflight, they attacked each other's planets and brought them very close to the danger of destruction. And since our Federation is in charge of these 2 planets and of the inhabitants, we decided, according to the advice of the High Council, to transplant the 2 contentious peoples in order to guarantee their continued existence to the other and peace-loving peoples of the 2 planets. They also dominate the first spaceflight, but they do not pose any danger. However, the mistakes, 124 million of one people and 106 million of the other, were transferred to the planets I mentioned in the space areas IDAM and Nosir, where they will live from now on, without knowing the whereabouts of the other people. Moreover, it is impossible for the transplanted of both peoples to fly to other planets for many hundreds of years to come, because care was taken to ensure that the next inhabited planets are more than 130 light-years away from the colonies, so that they cannot be reached by the resettled. On the one hand, because their space technology is only just developed to the extent that distances of at most 430 million kilometers can be covered, while the age of the colonists is still very low with an average of 83 years.
But what about the names Simyase, Ptah, Quetzal, Sfath, and Plaja? How often do they appear in your newspapers? Are these with you common names like Hans and Harry, etc. with us?
No. These names are no longer common and therefore not frequent. The names you mentioned only appear once each, so for my daughters, Simya'a, Se, and Plaja, as well as for me, Ta and Quetzal. The name Sfath no longer exists at all. So with these names, the same case is given as with the names of your children, and with some children of your group members who have chosen old names from your name books for their descendants.
Then the names only exist once in your entire federation.
That corresponds to the meaning of my words.
And how is that possible?
The names mentioned have been handed down and preserved in our family and in Quetzal's since ancient times, because they have historically important meanings. This is limited to our family and Quetzal's family. All other families and people of our home planet era have different and more modern names, while the non-Plagiatic federated peoples, people and families, naturally have names that have nothing to do with the Plagiatic or the old lyrical ones.
My next question relates to the freezing or shock freezing of all kinds of life forms. If, for example, a person is shock frozen for any reason, perhaps to overcome time, etc., then I assume that this person is in a kind of apparent death. This means, however, that the spiritual form does not leave the body, but remains in it until the time when the body is revived. Am I right in my assumption? To my knowledge, you yourself have used such methods in the past, have you not?
That is correct, as is your explanation.
Another question. Have there been any bases or stations of aliens on Venus or Mars during the last 1,000 years, or perhaps on Mercury or any other planet of the Sol system, or perhaps on the Earth-Moon?
Except on Earth and on the Earth-Moon, not no.
And were these stations related to different extraterrestrials?
On Earth, they all came to us without exception. While on Earth's satellite, there were also four bases, which went to space-traveling peoples who had no connection to us, but who had very little contact with Earthlings, which in no way refers to modern times.
Still at Simyase's time, that emerges from the contact report of the 3rd of January 1981, Sea Contact 141, extraterrestrial people from the planet Hastur appeared in the terrestrial airspace, which travels in the system guarantee of the galaxy Jinan. It was said that these travelers at that time were interested in making contact with some Earthlings. However, I heard nothing more about it and assumed that this did not happen.
Your assumption is correct. We ourselves have tried to enlighten the Hasturans, after which they gave up their project and left Earth again without having achieved anything.
Do you also have a universal language in your federation? And if so, how is it called? And how many languages are spoken in your federation as a whole?
We have a universal or federation language, of course. However, this is not only spoken in certain circles of higher offices, as is the case with earthly artificial languages, but it is common with everyone. Samti the language is called by us, and as such it is learnt from the ground up by every member of the Federation as a second mother tongue in childhood. Because in addition to this, of course, the native mother tongue of the respective people still exists. The total number of our Federation-wide languages is 127,603.
Well, then I would like to know what your new travel and transport options are. How does this transmitter system work, and how long will it take to get it up and running?
Do you see this little device integrated into the chest of my clothes?
You mean this little matchbox-sized thing?
Yes.
It's hard to tell that from the clothes. Without my flashlight, I couldn't see it at all. It doesn't stand out at all.
This enables me to generate a transmitter gate by thought power, through which I can simply step through, after which I am already at my destination without any loss of time, even if this is billions of light years away. More precisely, I have to concentrate my thoughts in such a way that they are picked up by the device and amplified in such a way that the resulting forces create the transmitter gate through which my transmission to the destination is made possible. The system is not yet fully operational and usable, but we are constantly experimenting with it by transporting objects, etc., in this way for testing purposes. The required target data are created by the personal knowledge of the destination, which is then mentally programmed by the device, whereupon the transmitter gate is created in the form that the destination appears as a gate into which one can directly enter and is immediately at the destination. If the destination is unknown to one in such a way that one knows it neither by picture information nor by a personal being there ever, then mathematical coordinates are sufficient, which one enters into the device by thought power and which must be known to one naturally. If you like, I can give you a small demonstration of the possibility of such a transmitter gate. However, you must promise me that you will not let yourself be carried away by your indomitable thirst for adventure and that you will simply step into the gate, because it is not yet fully developed for human transmissions and can therefore still be dangerous. The danger is still that transmitted objects, etc., do not reach their destination, but disappear somewhere untraceable and not retrievable between the dimensions and thus get lost. Can I fulfill you a wish what you want to see through the transmitter gate as a destination? Maybe something you know?
Would it be possible for you to open the gate to Quetzal's house where the fountain is at the pond?
That doesn't mean a problem because the place is well known to me. Look!
Fantastic. 2 steps, and I would be on Quetzal's terrain on Era. Look, Quetzal's Ulrak passes. By the way, where did he get this little cattle from? And can't that suddenly enter the transmission gate and get lost here?
It's an animal that lives on Era. It can't get here because the gate is only visible from here on the one hand, but not from the other side, and on the other hand it can only be used from this side. This has been designed for safety reasons to prevent unwanted life forms from passing through the gate. If it were different, it would be very dangerous. On the other hand, the gate can only exist as long as it is thought to exist.
And is this technique of transport then the absolute ultimate for all time? Or is a further development still possible?
The development only ends where the power of consciousness alone is sufficient to transport oneself and materials of all kinds by teleportation or telekinesis from a point of departure to a specific destination, without any technical aids being required. This also means that you do not need any spacecraft, etc., to move from one place to another or to transport materials from one place to another. The next development, however, will be to find and use the means to move from one place to another without a transmission gate, and to do so solely by the power of thought, which is technically amplified in such a way that a teleportation can be carried out that can bridge billions of light years, as well as the technology of transmitters that is now emerging. Nevertheless, even then, the spacecraft will still be needed, which will also be further advanced in development.
And everything is based on the speed of creation, 107,000 times the speed of light. Even with the present transmitter gate, this cannot be any different.
That is not quite correct, because for the time being it is based only on 21,000 times the speed of light. Besides, the speed of the spirit should never be reachable by technical means.
The size of the gate is about 2 meters by 90 centimeters, and for a human, the gate is just good in size. But what if a larger gate is needed, such as for large goods and the like?
The size of the transmitter gate can be customized according to your needs. This is done by a simple command, mentally directed to the gate generator device.
Fabulous. It really could not be simpler. But what happens now? If somebody takes over the transmitter gate generating device without authorization, is there perhaps a safety device, as you use it with your weapon tools, that only the owner of the device can use it, because it is tuned to his thought frequency?
That's what you say. This alone guarantees the best possible security, so that no one can use the devices for unfair and nonsensical purposes without authorization. Should they fall into unauthorized hands for any reason, if we are active on worlds whose people cannot yet be expected to use such devices.
As is the case on Earth, for example, isn't it?
That's right.
Well, now you also have devices and the like, which look like a simple piece of metal or plastic, etc. Without these being recognizable as devices or apparatus, etc., but in which there is a high-quality super mini-L electronics, which again is not recognizable as such if you cut the metal or the plastic, because everything is poured into each other. Isn't there the possibility that through some circumstances the truth can be found out?
This danger does not exist, not even on Earth, because in order to be able to fathom this technique, earthly scientists would have to have a knowledge and a technique that would be 7,500 years in the future for them.
That means that over the last 18 years you have made progress approaching 4,000 years, right?
It's 216 years more, yes.
But this can only have happened through the friends of Asket's people, if I see the matter correctly, namely those friends who are ahead of Asket's people by about 4,000 years, that is to say 4,216 years in technical development.
That is also true, but I must enlighten you about the fact that also the people of the Ishrish Asket have attained the entire higher development of the 4,216 years.
Contact Report 248.
At earlier times I often spoke with Simyase about the Earth humans and about people of foreign worlds. Simyase also used certain terms for the people of the Earth, and for those of extraterrestrial origin, like also you and Quetzal, and all others of your Federation. Thus, there was always talk of humanoids and of extra-humanoids, non-humanoids and inhumanoids, etc. In this respect, unfortunately, there are always misunderstandings, which should one day be removed from the world. Let me therefore explain these things in the way I have understood them. Correct me, please, if I make a mistake. Humanoids are Earth humans. Only, these are so called because they are just Earth-born, respectively Earth-created, in accordance with the Latin word humanus, which means something like terrestrial. The Latin term was already used by the ancient Lyrans, and to be sure, in the same way as on the Earth, since time immemorial. So the term comes from the ancient Lyrans, who had also named their homeworld, in the original sense, Earth, and in consequence of this, they had also designated themselves, using a word adaptation, as Earth humans, as humanoids, after which then, in the course of time, the word humanoid was exchanged for the term human and, thus, for all human life forms throughout the whole universe, but with the difference that the differently disposed, exotic human forms, who didn't exactly resemble the Lyran humans, respectively the terrestrial humans, in their inner and outer anatomies, were called extra-humanoids, respectively foreign humans. Consequently, the term humanoid was only used for the kinds of humans of a more terrestrial, respectively Lyran, nature. Nevertheless, the extra-humanoids, respectively the so-called extraterrestrials, belong to the genus Omidam, and thus are humans. It's just that they are of an exotic nature. Both terms, humanoid and extra-humanoid, trace back to the value of Omidam, which means something like first human, or just simply human. So humanoids are, always and in each case, humans, no matter what exotic appearance and what anatomy they have, and no matter whether they are designated in other ways than as extra-humanoids. I often mistakenly referred to these extra-humanoids, while speaking or writing, as non-humanoids, which doesn't correspond to the truth, of course, because non-humanoids, respectively inhumanoids, are in reality non-human life forms that are animalistic, respectively of a fauna-like or floral-like nature, and therefore have nothing to do with human life. The term non-humanoid, respectively inhumanoid, clearly means that such a life form is non-human. In contrast, there are, for example, the peoples of Asina, extra-humanoids who deviate in their appearance and in their anatomy very exotically from the actual humanoids and look accordingly different as amphibian beings, respectively amphibian humans, and are arranged into other living conditions than those of humans, the kind to whom we and you belong. But these foreigners are called extra-humanoids, not because of their appearance but simply because they are of an anatomically different nature than we, who simply designate ourselves as humanoids. There are, for example, many extra-humanoids that are outwardly identical or very similar to humanoids, but they have extremely notable differences in their internal anatomies. This also testifies of the fact that they are not of terrestrial creation, but are simply beings of alien worlds, which is why they are, indeed, extra-humanoids. However, their anatomy also contributes to this designation, because they are alien to those who are simply called humanoids, respectively humans. However, this should not mislead one to regard and judge the extra-humanoids, the foreign humans, as non-humanoids, respectively non-humans. They are still humanoids and, thus, omidim humans, so extra-humanoids are, in every case, always human beings. It's just that have no direct birth relationship with actual humanoids, the race of humans embodied by the Earth humans and your people. And to address the non-humanoid life forms once again, these are life forms that are not humanoid and, thus, are in no way of a human nature, and that also have no relationship or other connections with the human species, respectively with the omadam and humanoids as well as extra-humanoids. And to come to speak once again of the extra-humanoids, it must be said that these are neither better nor worse humans than the humanoids of the Earth. The Earth humans, even though they often have very different and rather exotic natures, and indeed, in every respect. Extra-humanoids as well as extraterrestrial humanoids aren't supernatural and aren't divine and, thus, are no monsters and no terrors. Rather, they are just as human as the Earth humans. The Earth humanoids, of whom, at least for the last 10,000 years, not exactly much that is praiseworthy can be said. When one considers that during this time on our planet, only 250 years of actual peace has prevailed. So in terms of this, as well as in reference to their manner and humaneness and compliance with the natural creative laws and commandments, as you know, not very many positive things can be said. Concerning the reproduction of the extra-humanoids and other humanoids in the entire expanse of the universe, it must be said that in this respect, it doesn't behave any differently with all of them than it does with the Earth humanoids, so with the Earth humans. Therefore, sexual acts are necessary in order to witness descendants. What is different from the Earth humans is just the manner of the physical act of reproduction, in accordance with the exoticism of the respective life form and, accordingly, its exotic reproductive organs and reproductive practices, which are often connected with rituals that are strange to the Earth humans. Also, humanoids and extra-humanoids can mate with one another in order to witness descendants, if this is possible due to the dissimilarity between the exotic reproductive organs and if the DNA factors etc. are compatible and allow for procreation. It is, of course, utter nonsense that procreation and births of descendants can occur in a purely spiritual form, for a material body is always tied to a physical reproduction and birth. This is a fact that punishes all those dreamers, know-it-alls, believers in angels, and other delusional believers in lies, who maintain the contrary.
Your explanation corresponds to the facts.
There, it would once again interest me as to how far this federation actually extends, because you have told me several times that you have investigated some very faraway enterprises. It would also be interesting to know whether other civilizations have the same laws and rights as those of the Pleiades.
The duties, laws, and rights are uniform throughout the entire Federation. This is one of the basic prerequisites to join our Federation. The Federation is very broad and extends to a distance of 6.2,6,200,000 light-years, where in connection with our Federation, another member Federation exists according to our model. In between the two Federations, which have a sphere of influence of many millions of light-years, there are isolated systems that also belong to our Federations. Indeed, there are still other civilizations that have the same or similar directives as we have, but there are also many that know no inhibitions in this respect, but rather interfere without hesitation in other cultures and wage wars, etc. In relation to this, there are quite furious space-traveling peoples.
Do you have political and diplomatic relations with such?
That is an inevitable consequence of spaceflight.
Sim Ya say, your daughter, had reddish-colored hair for a long time. Is that usual with you? I mean that women dye their hair? Although we have talked about these things once before, we weren't detailed enough. You explained to me that women among you do this, but it didn't arise as to whether they only do this for purely medical reasons, and whether this is not actually harmful to the hair.
Female beings among us actually color their hair every now and then because a certain amount of vanity is not to be denied to them. Nevertheless, the dyeing of the hair is not just vanity conditioned, but is always connected with a health measure. It's like this. Even though prominent diseases no longer appear among us, this doesn't mean that certain sufferings still don't come to light. However, these are of an insignificant form, like a runny nose. There are also allergies and a few other insignificant illnesses. All these illnesses are often lengthy and require prolonged treatment, like also headaches, for example, but this doesn't mean now that many medicines would be necessary for their treatment. Per symptom, only one active agent is necessary against it, which is delivered with a long-term effect. These active agents aren't ingested, injected, or administered through special requirements for deposit. Rather, they are introduced in healthy, absolutely harmless carrier substances that are mixed with equally neutral and non-health hazardous coloring means with which the hair is then dyed.
So then, you do know illnesses.
These aren't actual illnesses according to your sense, but rather trifles that occur in the course of life due to some circumstances that the persons concerned are exposed to, like when they come in contact with some things on strange new worlds that then cause the suffering. But such sufferings are, in fact, always only trifles, which also no longer appear on our world and thus don't matter anymore.
Then your world is, so to speak, sterile?
No, the humans are immune to all diseases that once existed on our planet. They are also largely immune to diseases of other worlds, but various insignificant sufferings as well as accidents with insignificant consequences cannot be avoided every now and then, when these have their origin on planets that are foreign to Era.
Then only those people who also visit foreign worlds become sick with the insignificant sufferings?
That is right. That is also the reason why we exercise great caution with respect to health.
Now I understand somewhat better. But how, for example, can one of you suddenly suffer from a headache, which seems like a migraine?
That can happen through the inhaling of an atmosphere that is very well breathable for us, but which contains weak components of toxic gas that attack certain parts of our nervous systems, as this was the case with my daughter Sim Ya Say, for example.
But still, you do have your devices and apparatuses that indicate to you such toxic gases, etc. Accordingly, you can then wear protective suits.
Certainly, that is right. But on the one hand, our measuring instruments can only detect and indicate those materials that are known to us, in order, then, to analyze them. However, other substances that are unknown to us cannot be analyzed immediately if we must first explore their composition. Moreover, it can happen that certain gases, etc., only arise here and there, or in a locality, and indeed in such a quick way that a countermeasure is hardly possible anymore. So it may just happen that every now and then such substances are inhaled, which can then produce lasting consequences, which we then just treat in the explained manner.
Aha. In foreign worlds, these surely aren't just gases that give you a hard time health-wise, right?
Of course not, because dust particles, pollen, viruses, bacilli, bacteria, plant juices, and various other things can infect us with diseases if we aren't immune to these.
Aha, so yes, then you are not just susceptible to trifles.
As a rule, it only concerns trifles, which are then treated in the way that I explained.
And when, apart from the rule, a worse illness makes its appearance?
That would be a great exception, and such would be treated, of course, with the suitable medical means, whereby the healing process would then take no more than a few minutes, or at the most a few hours.
And in cases of accidents with fractures, etc.
Our medical possibilities are capable of healing a fracture in less than 6 hours, if the break does not first have to be addressed. But if this is the case, then the process takes a few hours more. Concerning diseases, our immune systems are so strengthened and protected that all diseases that are known to us cannot befall us, but only those that are unknown to us, and against which we have no immunity, respectively those whose originators are unknown to us, and against which we can't even protect ourselves.
And how does it stand then with the cold? Simya Se once complained to me that you also have to struggle with it.
It concerns an insignificant evil that befalls us, but only on the earth. However, we are still able to become masters over this.
Contact Report 249.
Can you tell me the number of alien races that are currently flying in and out of the Earth, or doing their studies here, or working here in any other way?
For many years, they have always been the same, and in their number, only 3.
3 alien races have been on Earth for several years, you said. Do they also have stations here, if they are constantly present?
Only one of the 3 groups is still stationed on Earth for some time, while the other 2 groups appear only sporadically or periodically.
And new aliens, how often do they come into contact with the Earth?
That is quite different. In earlier times, it happened only twice that during a period of 100 years, more than 2 groups of non-earthly intelligences flew into the earthly space. Usually such occurrences are only sporadic. As often as many hundreds or thousands of years pass before another alien race reaches Earth. Sometimes several thousand years pass before such an event takes place again.
Contact Report 250.
Prostitution, do they also exist on Era?
This degeneration has not existed in our country for a long time, but it is still prevalent to a low degree among various Federation peoples.
And what about sexually transmitted diseases?
Such diseases are no longer present in any way, not even among those Federation peoples where prostitution is still common in a limited form.
Another question regarding prostitution. Why does some of your Federation peoples still have prostitution?
There are only 3 of them, and they are still very young in our Federation. They were accepted into our Federation only a few years ago, and the efforts to abolish prostitution are running in controlled final forms, so that in less than 8-10 months these peoples will also be freed from this inhumane bad habit. Since time immemorial, we have used a bat symbol as a hazard image for radioactivity. Note: the following comments relate to Billy Meier's time in India 1965, visiting the Buddhist monk Dharmawara Belong Mahathera at the Asoka Mission in Merauli.
Swami Dharmawara, so I know, is one of those Earth humans who had contact with two mysterious humans. Phobal Cheng confirmed that to me again, who just appeared out of nowhere with him and disappeared again in the same way. So it was the same kind of disappearing and coming back as if you beamed me into the ship or back to Earth. The appearance of these two mysterious men who visited the Swami was the same like his, therefore Asian. Can you explain something about it to me?
Officially, I can only confirm that this is true. But these are not intelligences who were located beyond Earth, if that's what you think. They were probably distant descendants of extraterrestrial humans, but they were earthbound, even if they mastered the ability of the craftless journey, which was handled by technical means. The how, what, where and why, etc., I unfortunately cannot and must not officially explain, which is why I can only explain this to you in confidence.
Contact Report 251 Note: this contact report contains a detailed history of the Pleiadians and their emigration to our solar system, which is not reproduced here.
All of them, all extraterrestrials who stayed on Earth and died here, never returned to their homeworlds. Their spirit forms slipped into the earthly realm of the afterlife, and since then have reincarnated again and again in new becoming bodies of people who were born on Earth. But what might be of interest for the group, and for all other people, is the fact that for years, it was not allowed to talk about certain things related to visits of extraterrestrial intelligences, except of those that were mentioned by you, and especially by you. You told me that I was allowed to speak openly about this when you left.
That is correct. We were just talking about those who had played an important role up to that point, namely, the three groups that we had discussed in one of our last conversations. In addition to these, there are a few other groups of extraterrestrial origin that fly to Earth and can be observed here more often, but none of which is in contact with any Earth humans, neither on a private nor on a military or governmental basis. Some of them come to Earth purely for excursions or expeditions. Others have other interests, but none in the way that the hysterical Americans portray this, with the impregnation of Earth women by Earth alien intelligences or the impregnation of Earth alien women by men of Earth. The nonsense about massacring animals, etc., can also be forgotten, for such things do not apply either. Those who have interests other than those of an excursion or expedition will make a name for themselves on Earth in the distant future. But why this will be so, we must keep quiet about it, which of course also applies to you, who are informed about these distant things of the future.
Well, thank you. But why were not we allowed to talk about those aliens you just talked about all these years?
On the one hand, this has to do with the new, distant future and with the new era of Earth, about which we are not allowed to talk openly, as I explained, and on the other hand, careless information about it would only have led to further hysteria and to lies and deception, as well as to swindles and charlatanry, as was unfortunately already the case in America, Germany, England, and Japan, as well as in Sweden, etc.
Yes, I know. Especially America is raging in hysteria and madness.
That is correct. But there not only the MUFON is to blame for the whole hysteria, but also the many religious sects, as well as in particular the government itself, which actually conceals and keeps under lock and key much important evidence for the existence of extraterrestrial life and their appearance on Earth, as well as forbids by laws the contact with extraterrestrial life forms. The rule also proves on all our Federation worlds that hardly anything can be done against heavy earthquakes in a reasonable way, if high buildings, etc., are erected, which is why only small buildings are usual everywhere and largely secured against heavy shocks. Also, our worlds live and are shaken by earthquakes, but we behave accordingly in the construction of the buildings and in their protection against shaking of the planets.
You also have houses or buildings that are not composed of small pieces, such as stones or concrete slabs, etc., because your buildings are made of plastics and also of a single piece, seamlessly, as I have seen. In addition, they are on spring systems, which are made as vibrating bodies.
That is correct, but these are only two of the methods used to prevent vibrations. In the time to come, even farther away, a lot will happen and change with regard to alien aircraft and their crews, but also with regard to earthly, mysterious, and strange-looking flying machines. Also, contacts with extraterrestrials are to be expected, which will be, however, of a completely different nature than all previous lying, swindling, and deceitful would-be contactees have presented them with all their religious sectarian nonsense, etc.
Contact Report 257.
Then I would have another question now, which refers to the coming and appearance of extraterrestrials who have no connection whatsoever with you, and who should actually make open contact with Earth humans. Can I find out, for example, when this time will really be? The date once mentioned to me has become obsolete because things have happened with Earth humans and in their politics, which made the appearance of the extraterrestrials impossible.
The time is relatively close according to our terms, but for certain reasons I will not name the more exact time, because thereby steps could be taken by the terrestrial man, which would thwart everything another time. Then the question should only be answered in such a way that no exact dates are mentioned. It must therefore suffice if I say that the time is relatively near at which people of an alien world will appear openly on this planet.
After which you will finally withdraw, as you have always assured.
That was always the meaning of our explanations in this regard.
Your concepts of time are of course different from ours here on Earth. So your word is a broad concept if you say that the time is already relatively near, when official contact between extraterrestrials and terrestrial humans can be expected.
Time is really not very far away anymore. The only question is whether the military, secret services, and governments will not change the open appearance in such a way that the public will be misled, and the real facts will not be falsified and concealed again, as this was done with regard to previous occurrences of a similar kind with extraterrestrial aircraft and beings of foreign worlds.
Let me ask a question about the old Earthlings. Did they also do so primitively and stupidly with the appearance of extraterrestrials? As is the case with today's mankind, especially with the military, the secret services, and the governments, as well as the sectarians.
No comparison can be made in the matter of military, secret services, and governments. Where people acted abnormally, there was actually the delusion in play by which aliens were judged either as devils or as gods. In military, secret service, and governmental respects, however, with few exceptions, no aggressive machinations were common on the aliens, which unfortunately has changed drastically in modern times.
Certain people become more stupid than normal. Extraterrestrials. I am often asked whether then only the Pleiadian come to Earth as extraterrestrials. Naturally, that is not the case, because there exists yet various other extraterrestrials who fly into terrestrial airspace and can also often be observed. They are, in part, members of the Pleiadian Federation, who cannot, however, be counted as foreigners who stem from planets and solar systems that have no state of affairs at all with the Pleiadian and their Federation worlds. These foreign extraterrestrials come from the most different star systems, which as a rule belong to our galaxy, respectively the Milky Way, whereby, however, exceptions also exist, however only very few, in which the extraterrestrials stem from foreign and millions of light-year distant galaxies. There are, however, few like this to note that they can only be spoken of as a rarity. Therefore, the greatest caution is recommended with extraterrestrial contacts in the sky, because too much about this are lies, deception, swindle, charlatanism and speculation, etc., whereby also the truth-despising efforts and falsifications as well as disinformation machinations of the governments are implicated through the committal and establishment of unbelievable lies, slanders, falsifications, and trickeries in the world to veil the truth, to contradict, and to deny. The Roswell UFO crash is just one of many inglorious examples. Naturally, not all terrestrial governments and military work in this slimy way, but there are many. And they get ever more difficulty from those peoples who are really interested in the UFO clarification and the events connected therewith, as they turn the heat up under the governments, the military, and the secret services. The time namely presses ever more, because ever more UFO incidents take place, and also pure UFO observations increase ever further. So the responsible ones use their lies, defamation, and denial ever less, whereby they apply a new obscuring technique to keep secret the actual existence of extraterrestrials, as well as their visits to Earth. Their new method is to demonize everything that has to do with UFOs and extraterrestrials. That, thereby, also serves to hinder the coming about of contact with extraterrestrials and civilians, because that can no longer be controlled, and because, as a rule, civilians who are not bound by a military or secret service security status do not shy away from making such experiences and events openly known. But such open information is exceedingly uncomfortable, and even exceedingly dangerous for the governments as well as for the military and secret services, etc., as their power structures could become shaky. Of this it was already clear to a whole lineup of authorities, as well as their military and secret services in the First World War, because, over the battlefields of Europe, UFOs were observed whose appearance was, however, kept secret. It went the same way in the Second World War, as the Foo Fighters surfaced everywhere. Indeed, it was already firmly established by the military and secret services and highest government positions by the First and Second World Wars that UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin, yet the secrecy was still maintained. The facts of the extraterrestrial origins of flying devices was recognized in America through the observation of a landing of such an object, where 4 unusually clothed humanoid beings disembarked, collected some plants in the vicinity, re-entered their device, and flew away. The observers of these events were 2 members of the military who, coincidentally, were in just that area while on vacation. Both reported the event to the nearest military facility, allowing the secret investigations and clarifications to proceed, as had already happened in other similar cases that preceded, and also subsequently occurred even more. But everything happened under the strictest non-disclosure, as the Pleiadian Pleiaren have affirmed, so the public received no knowledge about these incidents whatsoever, as neither did the main body of the governments, the military, and the secret services. It was always only the very highest positions and officials who were privy to the secrets. And it was also these people who even then concerned themselves with, and worked out, concealment tactics to deceive most of their subordinates and the entire population. It was to be avoided that on one hand everything would be known, and on the other hand that those not in the know and not sworn to secrecy, or even civilian personnel, could have contact with extraterrestrials. Therefore, a possibility was sought to place fear in humans in relation to the extraterrestrials, so that no contact would result from a possible landing or from a crash of extraterrestrial projectiles. But that was not enough by far, because the longer the UFO appearances in the New Age were observed, the more secretively these were dealt with, and indeed not the least on that account, because the arrival of the extraterrestrials, and the enslavement of the terrestrial humanity through the invaders, was feared by the American government and their military as well as secret services. And so, that the population should be left in ignorance about the truth of the existence of extraterrestrials. Nevertheless, however, that fear must be developed in the peoples against the extraterrestrials, out of which a far-reaching hate must be established against the invaders, and, thereby, once again a defensive rage steered by hate should result. The U.S. presidency, as well as the leading officers of the military and the secret services, etc., came upon a psychologically sophisticated idea to work out a horror scenario in extraterrestrial matters, and to start it in such a way that not only America would be seized by it, rather also great parts of the rest of the world. This scenario should be configured in such a way that once angst and panic should first break out regarding extraterrestrial invaders, thereafter they then spread further fear and hate far, and could spread it over the world, and indeed also then, when it would be officially recognized that it all only dealt with fiction and therefore a poor utopian piece of work. Thereby the psychological trick would be established, that when once fear is sown, then from that yet greater fear, and finally also panic and hate must develop. That follows itself further, always spreading out farther. A fact that was already known then, and also today, yet would be practiced again and again over the whole world in different relationships. And exactly angst and terror were necessary, according to the view of the responsible ones, to incite the population against the extraterrestrials, and to prevent them from coming into contact with them if the opportunity should present itself. Through this perfidious and fully thought-out psychological machination of the highest government authorities as well as the military and secret services, it also should be avoided that at any time, any one of the people would gain admission to the extraterrestrials if the opportunity offered itself. The responsible ones not only had fear of a peaceful extraterrestrial official or unofficial landing and contact initiative, but they also feared an invasion. And because an official or unofficial extraterrestrial appearance and effect on the Earth was not compatible with the religious philosophies, since 1915, Pope Benedict XV, 1914 to 1922, as well as Pius IV, 1922 to 1939, and Pius X, 1939 to 1958, would also be drawn into the entire conspiracy. Also, certain Jewish dignitaries were enlisted in this, who even at that time in America had quite a bit to say and had a voice. In the most secret of missions, it was therefore resolved to create a horror scenario which would agitate the population on one hand, who, however, should be left in ignorance of the truth of the existence of the extraterrestrials who already maneuvered in terrestrial airspace, and also landed sporadically on the Earth, as it has been established from secure sources, and through that, on the other hand, that fear and hate be sown against the strangers from other worlds. The mean and slimy trick was in and of itself simple. A radio broadcast should be transmitted, that on one hand spreads angst and terror of the extraterrestrials, and on the other hand, should also strike very far, and as much as possible, worldwide circles. To this end, through American Secret Service agents, as well as through the responsible superiors of these positions of duty, as well as the government and militarily, suitable authors and works were sought, which could be exploited and used for the perfidious machination. It was U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, President, 4th March 1933, 12th April 1945, who quite personally, however, sought out the science fiction work of Englishman Herbert George Wells, who as an author, in 1898, brought out a work under the title War of the Worlds. In this episode, American Secret Service agents made contact with Wells and beseeched him coercively to adapt his work to a radio play. But the man himself did not feel in a position to do this, so he suggested chartering a young American author of his acquaintance, Orson Welles, who would certainly be suitable. Under threats of death, H.G. Wells was obliged to lifelong silence, after which, then in America, the still young Orson Welles would be coerced by the Secret Service people to refashion H.G. Wells's work, War of the Worlds, into a realistic-seeming horror radio play. Out of the science fiction novel Wells wrote in 1897 and published in 1898, such a work that broadcast on the radio would release wild panic and angst as well as hate for the extraterrestrials. The work, in which extraterrestrials, formed unlike humans, and of monstrous and evil nature, land on the Earth and cause trouble and destruction, was exactly that which had been hoped for by the responsible ones of governments, the military and the secret services. It's no wonder that as a result of panic breaking out there was quite a number of dead. The goal of the government, the military and the secret services was achieved with the broadcast of the radio play War of the Worlds, because from then on fear, and also a certain hate, ruled against the extraterrestrials of the kind and form, as well as the sense, that was also always desired. And exactly that has remained that way until today, and even still spreads out, because fear and hate would again always be newly stirred up, and the American Secret Service powers, etc., are especially proficient in doing exactly that. Were that not enough, that they and certain also determined government and military powers financially support and demand Contra films against the extraterrestrials? No, they do not shy from simulating all kinds of horror events, like for example abductions by extraterrestrials, as well as human and animal mutilations and so on and so forth. They are also not inactive in matters relating to the falsification of crop circles, and indeed in the most differing countries. Naturally, in respect of all these things there are also charlatans, deceivers and swindlers and every other sort, yet the Secret Service machinations are probably indeed the worst, because it is precisely through these that disinformation is established, through which the genuine and actual events in this regard are bedeviled and made laughable. Scarcely anything is known about exactly this, as everything runs so secretly as it always has, and as does the actual story of the radio play of War of the Worlds by Orson Welles. And the danger exists that something could not be held secret, then the responsible ones of the government and military as well as the secret services do not shy away from bringing the witnesses to silence under death threats or through an otherwise erasing, like, for example, through elimination or through a consciousness-stupefying brainwash and psychoterror and so forth. Herbert George Wells, who died on the 13th of August 1946, also knew that, as did Orson Welles, who departed this life on October 10, 1985. Neither left behind any indications about the true incidents regarding the radio play, as they correctly feared that their families, friends and acquaintances after their demise also could be vengefully persecuted by the Secret Service people and the responsible ones of the government and military. And that I now do not hold my tongue about that which the Pleiadian play are and explain to me in regard to this. What comes of that remains to be seen. The nasty machinations of the government, military and Secret Service people in respect of the demonizing of extraterrestrials have increased ever more since 1938. Indeed, slowly and successively. Thus, however, all the more incessantly and expansively, until in the 80s, essentially, the greatest machination for the bedevilment of extraterrestrials began, through a shifty structure in the fashion of the Secret Service, as well as miscellaneous UFO and extraterrestrial enemies. Stories came about like the ghastly human and animal mutilations, the theft of human babies, and the impregnating of terrestrial women through foreign visitors out of outer space. Horror stories were also disseminated about subterranean laboratories and the inhuman experiments taking place there. Were that still not enough? Because the angst of the extraterrestrials wreaked even worse blooms. Like, for example, it would be asserted that women impregnated by aliens would, after some months, have the baby growing in the womb snatched out to be allowed to finally grow further in a fluid-filled incubator, etc., in order to breed up a new humanity, etc., using these hybrid children. A further horror story was that the Earth humans would be abducted, in order to take their genetic material that would be necessary for the extraterrestrials' further breeding of humans, who would serve as, so to say, nourishment providers, because the evil foreigners out of the depths of outer space supposedly nourish themselves on human blood. Similarly, it would also be asserted in respect to the animal mutilations in America, whereby the related far-fetched feeble-mindedness that, namely beef blood, demonstrates a genetic relationship with human blood. Therefore, the mutilated cattle would have their blood sucked out to store in the blood banks for crisis times, naturally through the evil extraterrestrials. Yet even that is not enough, because still many other assertions, slanderings and lies, and clearly to be recognized as feeble-minded, are put about, through which the humans are led into error and would be shifted into angst and terror, as has had manifold success, and certain mass hysteria has been released by a worldwide group of certain Earth humans, which also leads to feelings of hate, etc. Well, then a question about the alleged appearance and official landing of extraterrestrials on Earth. Some people claim that on 27.3, 1997 extraterrestrials should officially land on Earth. Do you know anything about this?
We know these erroneous assertions, which are nothing more than bare nonsense, and which are connected with the Hale-Bopp comet, which is also known as Nibiru or Nubiru or Unis, on which gods live and should now return to Earth.
You explained all this to me years ago. So everything is nothing but bullshit and nonsense what is talked about the comet and the alleged official landing of extraterrestrials on Earth. I would also have been surprised if it had not been like that. Unfortunately, we have so many crackpots here on the Earth, and unfortunately even more misguided ones who believe all the nonsense of these crackpots. Furthermore, there are still many conscious liars, cheaters, swindlers, and charlatans who take advantage of the New Age madness of the believers and make horrendous profits out of it.
Unfortunately, that is the truth.
It goes to the year 2000 and there it is. Of course, like at every turn of the century or the last turn of the millennium, the doomsday mood, the alleged return of the dear Jesus Christ, as well as the coming of extraterrestrials, or even of the dear God himself. All nonsense.
Contact Report 260.
But now here's a somewhat loosening up question. One approached me in reference to whether I knew anything about the use of makeup by the female gender on Era. One wanted to know specifically whether lip balming occurs even with lipstick, as the women and girls do this here on Earth. For my part, I never saw such with your women.
This isn't common with our female gender in the way that it is with the women on Earth. In general, only a certain part uses subtle makeup from natural materials, while others don't use these things. The makeup is such that it doesn't change the naturalness of the skin, so it can hardly be seen, which isn't the case, unfortunately, with the earthly female gender. But that the lips are coated with colored lipsticks, as the women and girls do so on the Earth, that isn't the case with us, for we have already considered such actions as nauseating since ages ago.
The certain part of female people who use makeup, is this predominant?
Unfortunately, that isn't known to me, but as I estimate, that part should only be small and be more restricted to younger women and girls. But even when the technology, on Earth, will one day be perfected to the highest, cultivated living test forms will still be essential, as this is also the case with our relevant medical science researches. But as you correctly said, we do not use live animals but only specially cultivated organisms that have no feelings of pain, as well as no psyche and no consciousness, etc. This form of medical research is extremely limited, however, and is only used when we discover life forms on foreign worlds that are unknown to us in every respect, and about which we, therefore, still have no medical knowledge. For medical researches of all kinds, however, which concern our Pleiaren as well as all Federation worlds and, thus, also all their life forms of all kinds, we no longer depend on cultivating special organisms in order to be able to pursue the necessary researches. For in this respect, our computer programs are fully sufficient.
Then another question. Even the people of your worlds and your federated allies certainly aren't so perfect in terms of their organs and bodies. Therefore, surely health, or rather physical injuries can come to light. Or am I wrong there?
Our medical knowledge and possibilities are so developed that we no longer know diseases.
Of course, I know that. You explained this to me sufficiently. I also don't mean that some diseases can still appear. Rather, I'm coming from the perspective that, for example, there can be accidents and the like, by which health, or rather physical injuries can appear.
Now I understand. Of course, accidents cannot be avoided. for in spite of all precautions of the people, such dismal events can occur over and over again.
Good. Now we've brought it to a common denominator. My question about this is, how is a treatment or an intervention handled when, for example, a surgical intervention becomes necessary? Surgery is indeed a very bloody work, I think. Is it also still so bloodily maintained with you?
Of course not, because we have long outgrown this bloody barbarism. Now, our technology relating to this is so far developed that we can avoid all bloody interventions. Our apparatuses and devices, etc., are designed in such a way that open surgical interventions no longer have to be made, for all manipulations in or on the body are carried out in a pure, vibration-related manner. Thus, internal or external wounds as well as broken bones and torn blood vessels can be closed, joined, and healed within seconds or a few minutes. The operation of the apparatuses and devices, etc., occurs, of course, through trained doctors and other specialists, including bioorganic electronic androids, simply said. In addition, these are able to transport themselves to any location within a range of 300,000 kilometers, even there where they are needed. This occurs through a teleportation by apparatus.
You mean that they can beam themselves to any location? Just like that?
Yes, but that is nothing unusual.
For us Earthlings it is. Then these androids are true doctors?
Certainly.
With you, is anything also operated within the framework, as here on Earth with the so-called spiritual healing?
No. In addition, I must also say that what is operated under this designation by many people on Earth must be referred to as charlatanism. Of course, exceptions are given, but these are based on suggestion and self-healing.
Then here again is a question about the health of the people on Era and your other worlds. Although you have already answered this question for me once, it wasn't held in writing. Moreover, it is also answered with the fact that there are no longer diseases with you. But still, various people would like to be able to read your answer. So, on Era or with your people in general, is there still blindness, deafness, disability, and muteness, etc.?
No, all these evils, together with all diseases and infirmities, have no longer appeared for many millennia, which is also connected with our prenatal investigations and necessary medical measures, which are based in the creative law that each newborn life has an absolute right to consciousness-related and physical intactness.
Contact Report 264.
There are several groups of extraterrestrials who function around here on Earth, but to my knowledge you have nothing to do with them. But do they know that you are here?
No, because we also keep ourselves secret from these few. Our directives demand this, but also our security.
Observations of unknown flying objects, a large number of which are certainly of extraterrestrial origin, have become very frequent in recent years. Can you give me the reason?
The time is approaching when the first official contact with Earth foreigners is to take place. The efforts of certain Earth-foreign humans come down to this. I am not allowed to explain more about this, because we are not allowed to intervene in current events that are not directly connected with our own interests. Whether this encounter with Earth humans will actually take place in the near future, however, has already become questionable again as a result of the new political turmoil, which will also increase again in the future, whereby malicious acts of war are to be expected.
Of course not. You've explained that to me very often.
It must be said. However, with regard to the fact that many humans on Earth observe the sky more attentively and see the most diverse unknown flying objects, and that this is due to the controversy that has been triggered worldwide as a result of your contacts with us, as well as your photo evidence and your person and history. Through this controversy, many humans have become aware of the existence of the Earth foreigners, and consequently the humans are paying more attention to the heavens. From the whole, it follows, however, that very many Earth humans become familiar with the thought that extraterrestrial human life exists.
Contact Report 269, the 13th of May, 1996, 14:59 hours. Note: probably a private conversation during Contact 256.
It has been some time since you told me that now is not the time to expect official contact between extraterrestrials and terrestrials.
The time is really not very far anymore. The only question with regard to the expected contacts is whether the military, secret services, and governments will not once again reshape the open appearance in such a way that the public is misled and the facts are distorted and concealed, as has been done with regard to previous incidents with extraterrestrial flying apparatuses and beings from foreign worlds.
Apart from you, Pleiadians, Pleiaren, and the members of your Federation, other Earth foreigners visit our world very rarely, and their flying apparatuses can be observed here and there.
That is right, but that is not our concern because we do not have any contacts to these strangers. We have never done that before. However, it is not to be denied that aliens are sometimes present in earthly area who have nothing in common with us.
On your last visit, you also told me that with regard to the so-called crop circles, everything is no longer of a purely earthly human nature, but that for some time now there have also been Earth foreigner influences at play.
That's also true, but I do not want to go into any more detail about it, because we are not allowed to interfere in things and events that are not compatible with our mission. We must not disregard our directives and therefore not violate them.
Then things have actually changed with regard to crop circle forgeries and certain things, just in the sense that now also extraterrestrial influences are involved.
For quite some time, this is actually swinging wave-based the case. However, this does not mean that the pictograms, etc., are not genuine and cannot be traced back to the Earth foreigners. As always, counterfeits are being made by freeloaders who are not exposed to the swinging waves.
And what is the connection between the pictograms, which are created by the influence of extraterrestrial vibrations of forces? I think it's rather stupid that humans on Earth who are not yet highly developed make themselves felt in this way.
11. So, the connection does not exist by coming events within SOL system, and also not by the announcement of the appearance of Earth foreigners whose ancestors came to Earth earlier. The only thing that is certain for us so far is that there are certain extraterrestrial energy influences that influence humans on Earth, among others, so that they are active in making pictograms. This does not mean, however, that everything concerning the so-called crop circles is allegedly of honest origin, that it is traced back to influences of Earth foreign beings.
Recently, I was asked whether it is just as common for you on Era and in your Federation for humans to do plastic surgeries and the like as it is here on Earth. Until now, actually more for the female sex, but recently also more and more for men.
No, such things are frowned upon by us, because all humans with us are of the opinion and conviction that one should age in honor and see and wear the signs of age on the face, hands and body, and never tinker with nature's craft, as you once said, unless uncontrollable circumstances and influences cause physical deformations and devastations, which are then naturally aesthetically repaired and corrected.
Then there is cosmetic surgery, like facelifts, etc., and as is so common among the humans here on Earth, isn't there?
No, I already said that.
Contact Report 272.
And the foreigners? What kind of beam ships or flying apparatus do they have, and what do they want?
Their flying apparatuses bears a certain resemblance to ours and could therefore easily be confused by the uninitiated and ignorant. What the foreigners want is easy to explain. They appear once every 70 to 80 years on Earth, taking care of all sorts of things that reach into political as well as military and scientific matters, whereby their aim is to make an official appearance at the appropriate moment and to establish open contact with the Earth humans.
And were there contacts to them at earlier times? That is to say, did these foreigners interfere in the earlier concerns of Earth humans?
That was to some extent the case, yes.
Then there's a question I asked you a long time ago, but you still have not answered it. Obviously, you have forgotten the matter. It is that you promised to clarify when the first extraterrestrial people came to Earth.
We have found traces up to 234 million years in the past. These are our latest findings and discoveries. However, I have not forgotten your question about these things, but I have been silent about it so far because we're still researching and do not have any final results yet.
Contact Report 278.
Can I ask you something about viruses and bacteria, etc.? How you protect yourself against them when you are on other planets? Can you tell me about it?
I can do that very well. On the one hand, we are protected by our clothing, which is so much worked and equipped with sensors that it registers all kinds of pathogens known or unknown to us, etc., and destroys them with special radiation that is harmless to us. This applies both to bacteria and viruses of all kinds that you have mentioned, as well as to other pathogens, which, however, may still be unknown to earthly physicians. Our clothing, which we wear outside of our home planet, is equipped with an appropriate filter system, which eliminates all parasites, etc., all germs and all viruses and bacteria of every form. In addition, each of our flying apparatuses has a large, equally active filter and radiation device in the entry area, which is in continuous operation so that no germs can be introduced. These systems are absolutely safe.
But then there is something I do not understand. Simya Se once told me that they always have the problem of snuffing here on Earth.
That was indeed the case. But this fact only referred to when they or other of our groups wrapped themselves in earthly garments and thus lost the protection explained to you. As you know, Simya Se and several others temporarily moved among Earthlings at very short notice when there were special things to do. At that time, this could only be very short because heavy equipment had to be carried to protect the consciousness and the mind. However, if one of us was affected or infected by the common cold or any other illness, this was regulated and remedied by re-entering the flying apparatus and wearing the usual clothes again.
What was it like, or is it like with me? I have suffered from various diseases caused by bacteria or viruses.
That may be true, but as you yourself know, your diseases have never been so dangerous for Simya Se or any of us. Besides, as far as I know, you have already been informed about this by Simya Se. Special safety measures have been taken with regard to you and in function so that you can unhindered be with us and enter our flying machines. Further, you also know that in relation to your earthly physics, only these can be considered for disinfection, but not your inner organs, etc. This possibility exists only for us, which is why only we can keep ourselves free from any germs, etc. Our devices and apparatuses are only tuned to our bodies and organs, etc.
What do you think of it when you transport foreign planet inhabitants in your flying machines?
Special filter and radiation devices are required for this, which are tuned to the life forms concerned and which are then subjected to a holistic disinfection.
Contact Report 282.
What was held was used for demonstration and information purposes for all our Federation members.
I am flat. By all Federation members, do you really mean all humanities or just spiritual leaders? The latter would not be logical, because you speak of all members of the Federation.
You already understand it correctly. The meaning of my words refers to all members of the Federation.
Then I am reassured when only 120,120,000,000 humans from foreign solar systems and planets know what's going on in the center, how the group members behave here, what they do and work, and what their interests are, etc. I am not sure what I mean.
Contact Report 283.
The presence of those strangers on Earth, which we observe and with whom we have not been able to come into contact yet, although it is questionable whether we can ever do this. Foreigners.
Contact Report 287.
She and Jana had to make observations regarding the foreigners. These are now increasingly active in Swiss and German, as well as French, Italian, and Austrian areas. Also in the Nordic countries, they are increasingly noticeable for us.
And do you still not have any knowledge about their being here?
Both the purpose of their being here and their origin are still unknown to us.
And why you do not just simply make contact with them?
The foreigners offer us too many uncertainties in many respects. For this reason, we must strictly adhere to our directive of not establishing contact.
Contact Report 291 and note, see Contact Reports 90, 91, and 93 for information on Billy's first encounter with Asina. Asina, and that I speak your language is because of this little device here on my body belt. It is a language converter.
Aha, this is what Ptah told me about, that you Denneber have received such devices, as well as other flying apparatuses with which you can travel through space.
That is right. Furthermore, the peoples of Deneb have been members of our Federation for quite some time, which is why they have been equipped with appropriate technology.
And why are you here again, Asina? Asina. As usual, we are on an expedition, and since the Earth serves us well as a stopover to our next destination, we have moved into your time by a leap in time. Aha, I suspected something like that when I saw the lights in the sky. I assume that you jumped out of your dimension directly into our time, and we became aware of you just at the moment you were materialized. And I assume that this must have happened about 200 kilometers away from our center, somewhere in the north and over German territory.
Contact Report 292.
And how did you find Asina after all?
Of course, by calling them via our remote communication devices, when our search equipment and analyzers as well as the planetary communication attempts produced no results and remained unsuccessful. Consequently, we thought that the Armada must be outside the Earth, which is why we considered success through remote communication, which then produced the desired result.
You speak of remote communication and probably mean a hyperwave or interstellar radio or something. For us here on Earth, distance communication unfortunately only means from place to place, from country to country, or from continent to continent, or in the highest case to earthly space stations and manned space capsules and the like.
I understand. Of course, our remote communication devices refer to a technology that enables us to bridge millions and billions of light years at above light speed.
That's how far we Earthlings should be. But tell me, what is the average age of Asina's race, I mean of the Dennebers? Can you tell me that?
Of course, it's no secret. Their average age is 320 earthly years.
Earth humans have been eating genetically modified things for many thousands of years that have been genetically manipulated by extraterrestrials, such as the pear or the avocado fruit.
Anonymously, I shall also send you greetings and best wishes from many people of our Federation, whereby it must be clear to you that in our Federation many more people know you than you can imagine. Truly there are billions, which is especially due to all the works of spiritual, doctrinal form, etc., which you have made for us in all the years of our contacts, and which we of course spread through our spiritual leadership and through our communication channels, etc.
Contact Report 296.
Then there is a question about rituals for weddings, births, and naming, and about saying goodbye when people die. What do you think?
That is different for federations, because there are allies with us who cultivate rituals according to their kind. But for our part, and this refers only to us Plei-Aran, we have no rituals whatsoever. In the case of alliances, only a short word is spoken about the alliance to be entered into, as in the case of naming, in which a few words of welcome are also spoken about birth and appearance in life and as a new community member. If a person dies, then a farewell speech is given, which shows the deceased person in his deeds, thoughts, and feelings, as well as in his works and in his character, virtues and personality, etc. This also includes merits, etc. In all cases, however, no rituals take place, which is also the case for honors and merits, etc., during one's lifetime. Everything in the aforementioned matters takes place in a simple framework.
Aha, so no tam-tam. And what about busts and monuments, etc., in honor of people who have achieved great things?
Such commemorative works are also created by us, but no ritual acts are performed around them.
So simply pure works of honor and memory. This includes, as with us, gravestones and memorials?
That corresponds to the circumstances.
Even with memorials, there are no rituals and acts of worship, I suppose.
That's also true, yes.
Here on Earth, unfortunately, these things are handled differently. Pilgrimages, worship, cultural actions, etc. It's not about commemorative visits or simple memorial and testimonial visits to such places or monuments, etc. How is that with you in this relationship?
We also visit memorials and monuments, etc., but in any case, this is done only for the sake of remembrance and honor, and, as I said, no rituals and no ritual acts and the like are performed.
Contact Report 297.
How do you deal with wild animals? Do you care for them in the same way as the people here on Earth? So do you also go hunting? Do you also have hunters for this purpose?
Hunting is not permitted in our country, and we leave the regulation of the population in the animal world to nature and its laws. The free nature is left with us so big and actually free enough that all animals have their necessary free space. Consequently, no animals migrate into villages and cities, as is the case on Earth because the animals no longer have sufficient living space due to the enormous overpopulation of humans. It is forbidden for us to enter wild areas in order to build recreation or dwellings there. In addition, it is customary in our country, which unfortunately is not yet the case for all federates, that no game and no other animals which are kept in large parks and enclosures and which are used for dairy farming, etc., are killed in order to produce food from them, etc. We produce the necessary animal proteins for our food through special duplicators by producing synthetic meat that is absolutely equivalent to real animal meat.
Contact Report 304 Ternissa. I am Ternissa, and 182 years old. My homeland is Era, and I am Florina's closest friend, and at the same time I am also associated with Zaphanat Paniac. I greet you.
Splendid, that pleases me. I thought to myself that Zaphanat Paniac is a sneaky feller. By this I mean that he is already courting another woman, in addition to Florina.
That is his right. And Tanisa and I get along very well, and we are very pleased that Zaphanat Paniac has made his choice in this way.
Are you in pain, my friend? You move so strangely?
Unfortunately, my knees have been giving me trouble for about 3 weeks now. You know, my osteoarthritis. I can no longer stand or walk without much pain, so I bought a medical microwave therapy device in Germany, which should probably arrive this week. Then I can treat myself or my knees.
Sit down here and stretch your legs out. So, yes, one moment, this device diagnoses your suffering. Aha! Especially the left knee is severely inflamed and suffers from a very severe lack of cartilage substance. The right knee is also badly affected. For a moment, this device will give you immediate relief and neutralize the inflammation. So, how do you feel about your knees now?
You only drove over it once with your device. Well, actually, I do not feel any pain anymore. I get up and walk around a bit. Great, no more pain and everything seems to be normal again.
Contact Report 311.
Regarding the Syrians who at that time presented Svath with their pear-shaped spaceship, did that concern a people who, here on the Earth, is called Nomo? And did those who provided the gift belong to the genetic manipulators?
A people called Nomo is unknown to us, and indeed in our space-time configuration as well as in yours. My father Svath received his flying device as a gift from Assyrian people who are called Samanet.
Did these people have something to do with the genetic manipulators?
No, that is not the case. With the Samanet people, it deals with a people who live in a space-time configuration, which is not identical with that in which the genetic manipulators live.
Does it deal then with our space-time configuration?
No, that is not the case.
Then, in 1976, Simyase, your daughter, also did not speak of two solar systems of the planets of Sirius in our space-time configuration, rather of a completely different one. Note, see Contact Report 6385 to 88.
Certainly. We always only speak of the constellations known to you in your space-time configuration in order to show, in terms of direction, approximately what the talk is about in regard to the space-time configuration spoken about by us.
Aha. And how does it stand then with that in regard to inhabited systems in our space-time configuration?
Then we also do not speak of another space-time configuration or of other dimensions.
That's clear. Understood. I assume that those who were genetically manipulated also have nothing to do with the Samanet?
That corresponds to the situation. The Samanet are quite normal humans who have not been genetically manipulated.
Those who were genetically manipulated, who came into the solar system together with the refugees from the ranks of the genetic manipulators, and therefore with the sympathizers of the genetically manipulated ones, were the descendants of those who had been genetically manipulated, as well as descendants of those who did the genetic manipulations, or...
That is correct. The genetically manipulated descendants were descended from the 8th generation, as were the descendants of the genetic manipulators.
Contact Report 319.
If it pleases you, then I would like to play chess with you in the joy of a chess game.
Of course. Then let us start right away.
Contact Report 321.
Among the adolescents, and also among the younger adults here on Earth, unfortunately, there is very often a lack of respect for old age, and for human beings in general. In disgracefulness, people of all ages are shown neither respect nor reverence. But how could that be, when you consider how war, hatred, vindictiveness, racism, xenophobia, lack of love, betrayal, torture, the death penalty, injustice, sectarianism, exploitation, fraud, crime of all kinds, greed for profit and power, as well as terror and murder and manslaughter, along with labor rape and mistreatment of children and women of all ages and religious, social, and racial backgrounds prevail.
All these inhumanities are just as foreign on all our worlds and among all our races as they are on the worlds and among all the races of our Federation. In contrast to the human beings on Earth, we cultivate reverence and dignity and respect and honor in every respect, and consequently no hatred and quarreling, nor any of the evils and degenerations as you have called them.
Contact Report 323.
That slaughter, according to Jewish ritual, was never and at no time demanded by an Ishwish, respectively by a god, as it is expressed by Earth humans, because the renegades themselves who carried the title IHWH held to the law that animals of every species and kind should not be exposed to any kind of torture, rather if they are ready to be killed, that it must happen very quickly and completely painlessly. This was an irrevocable law since time immemorial that was always respected and followed by the evilest renegades themselves, and also today has unconditional validity for all of our peoples in the entire Federation, and is followed without exception.
Contact Report 328.
Then another question. What is your situation with the language mix? Will your various languages break in text? Are they preserved, or do they fall into decay like here on Earth? And is there anything of the kind that, as with us, is attempted by all means to exterminate other languages in order to make a special language the world language, as has been practiced here for decades or even more than a century by the Americans, who are primarily trying to exterminate the German language, along with all the others, and replace it with their American language?
Something like this does not happen here and would not be allowed. On Era 16,403 alone, we have different languages, which in turn have many dialects of their own, and for this it is determined by a corresponding law that all languages and dialects are preserved in their form. This means that the languages and dialects must not be mixed with others either, but must be preserved in their originality, which is a conscious duty for all errands to keep to it and not to let any violations arise. Many inhabitants of Era learn several foreign languages and dialects, much more frequently than is the case with humans on Earth. For the general understanding of all people of all ethnic groups among themselves, it is the duty of every single person on Era to learn the standard language, which we simply call Eranish Erin, as well as Playar and Sarat. This language is used from the earliest childhood. Therefore, it is equal to the mother tongue, and it can be said that every Eranisha citizen learns and cultivates two mother tongues perfectly from childhood on. In addition to this, we have the intercosmic Kosan, a language spoken throughout our Federation and spoken by little more than a third of our total population.
But another question. Now and then, the Earth humans from our future come into our dimension, and thus into our space-time continuum, as you explained to me on my great journey. Also, the Skrills and bioorganic flying objects, two special species, penetrate into our dimension from a dimension affiliated to us. Does this also apply to other humans of other dimensions who do not belong to you or to the Earth from the future?
That is the case, yes. But such occurrences are very rarely observed by us.
And what about foreigners from outside our Dern universe coming into our universe area from a foreign universe, apart from Asket's race from the Dal universe?
Something like that is not known to us. Even our very extensive monitoring and constant checks have never revealed anything that would indicate such events.
There's no possibility?
At least it's extremely small, because outside of our Dern-Dal twin universe, we are mostly surrounded by universes that are only subtle and therefore much more highly developed than our two universes. But now, dear friend, do I once again have a request concerning a game of chess if you are not too tired?
Fine, of course.
Contact Report 329.
This is Melkora and this is Urlana, both in the post of Aaron Spiritual Guides. Her companion is Jaspan, and he is an Aaron Spirit Guide. Reporter. A ninefold greeting of female and male voices is heard, whereby the hands are also raised to the left side of the chest for greeting, and a slight bow is made, whereby I naturally follow the familiar greeting gesture.
But what about you contacting future generations from Earth? Have you contacted any, or will you do so at all? And finally, I would like to know whether they are the same future pilots who have been seen, observed, filmed, and photographed in various forms all over the world for years. Is it possible to get more detailed information about this, or is the whole thing secret?
It is not classified as a secret. No, we have not made contact and will not do so because our directives do not allow us to do so.
But these are Earth humans of the future, who are already quite sophisticated.
The development of that form does not matter, because the directives also determine other conditions, such as the fact that a humans or a human race may no longer be subject to warlike actions, which is not the case with the future human beings, as you call them.
I see. So then at least these future generations still play warriors. It's a pity, a real pity.
Contact Report 334.
Since on the Earth the 66th birthday of a human is considered a special day, which is known to us, your day has also been commemorated on Era as a result of many requests in your honor, which is why your entire life story will be openly presented for several hours via our worldwide communication system to all Aran human beings who take a great interest in your work as well as in your life and your mission.
Contact Report 345.
What arises from the foreign universe?
First, after a many-month-long search, we found a planet on which rather still wild humans lived, who were only equipped with stone axes, stone spears, and stone knives.
Thus, cavemen, respectively Stone Age humans, are similar, correct?
Yes, they lived partly in caves, but also partly in primitive huts, which they made out of branches, leaves, and moss. Across the planet, we were able to identify 46 different groupings. The planet itself had large primeval forests as well as fertile land, on which many and diverse animals roamed and fed themselves on all kinds of things. You can yourself imagine approximately the same appearance that Earth presented around 6 million years ago. Weeks later, after which we further penetrated into the foreign universe, we came upon a small artificial object which was drifting through free space. When we got hold of it, we established that it was a probe created by intelligent life forms, which certainly had served for the exploration of a planet, but however apparently was driven from its course and was thrown out into free space. So we calculated the flight path of the probe and followed it for several months, after which we then actually reached a solar system, in which about a dozen planets moved around a central star, although certainly only 2 of the planets were developed in such a way that they were able to carry higher life, as we soon discovered. On one of the planets, the third, which was somewhat smaller than Earth and which was about 1.51 astronomical units distant from the Sun, and which traveled on its 677-day-long orbit about the central star and had a self-rotation of 21 hours and 37 minutes, there existed no human, but only higher animal life forms of primeval form, as well as also this primeval condition applied to the vegetation. The second planet, somewhat greater than the Earth, had 3 large island continents, which existed in a large saltwater ocean and were surrounded by a large number of smaller islands. Their entire mass was around 1/3 greater than the continental masses and islands of Earth together. This planet was at a distance from the Sun of 1.48 astronomical units and had a self-rotation of 22 hours and 52 minutes. The planet carried human civilizations. In fact, there were 3 different races, which consisted of diverse peoples, who were of white, green, and blue color, adding to a total number of around 498 million human beings. Our clarifications, which we carried out unobserved and without direct contact undertakings with the occupants, resulted in astonishing things as I want to explain as follows. The populations of the 3 continents mastered only 3 different languages, each one with a uniform dialect, which we nowhere else have yet detected. And although the 3 races work together in every respect, such as medically, scientifically, and technologically, etc., they do not mix with one another in the way that there would exist marriage alliances between members of different races. All 3 races had the same culture, the same state of knowledge in all things, and a medical science, which, highly developed, registered only just minor sicknesses. So in this respect they are far ahead of terrestrial medical and surgical science. There was nothing to find regarding religions and cults of any kind, because all 3 races in no way at all recognize faith, but only a kind of universal philosophy which is based on the fact that all life and existence arises from a higher power which is simply called the power by them. This is quite reverently observed, respected, and honored. However, it is not worshipped and not venerated. The power constitutes for them all origin of life and all existence, which both comes to be, and again passes away and again comes to be, and a unity and a duality is taught, so the material and the power, which lives in the material, passes away and again comes to be, while the material dissolves and changes into other material forms.
This is practically the reincarnation of the spirit form. The power would be then simply creation and at the same time the spirit form.
So it is, just only with other terms, as well as also everything interpreted and understood by the occupants of the planet. Regarding these 3 races still is to say that they are absolutely peaceful, in fact, both from human to human, as well as, however, also among the races and their peoples themselves. Wars are foreign to them just as well as hate and criminality, and purely technologically viewed, they are at the position which prevailed with Earth humans in the year 1968.
Astonishing. Then, these human beings are far ahead of Earthlings. However, how is it then with the form of government?
Each people decides totally on all interests, although a total representation of all 3 races exists, which is built in the form of an assembly of men and women, which as highest authority is to gain the required recognition of the will of the people.
A little complicatedly expressed, my friend. If I correctly understand your words, then with these 3 races and their peoples, so to say, there exists a combined leadership, which consists of persons, respectively representatives, of all 3 races. This leadership personnel exists in the service of the people, respectively of all peoples, and executes their decision. Respectively, they are responsible for the fact that the will of people, respectively, peoples is carried out. Then it is, so to say, a proper democracy. And how is it with these leadership personnel? Do they have then also their own power of decision?
Your interpretation corresponds to the sense of my words. The leadership personnel, which consists of 3 persons from all peoples, have only executing and advisory powers of the respective peoples, and they do not have their own possibility for decision. All leadership personnel are elevated to the standing of wise persons, whose duty it also is to work out all required necessities and present them to the people, who then decide about them. The 3 races and all of their peoples have no other party natures at all, like this is the case with Earth humans. On the other hand, they have the manner of voting in the way, as was the case since ancient times in Switzerland, in the manner of rural communities, in which the majority decision applied. The interests on which must be voted are announced first by the leadership personnel on the day of the vote, when the people assemble and have to deliver a for or against vote. So therefore no previous consultations are able to be made. Consequently, each citizen of each people, according to his own discretion and in accordance with his decision, has to make his own choice.
Interesting. How is it then with the military, respectively the armed forces?
Here, Pure harmony and peace exists among all three races and all of their peoples for a little more than 1,208 planetary years, and also exist no armed forces and no weapons industries for military purposes.
And so what about the police?
There is no such organization in the way like on Earth. Security personnel are certainly existing, but these constitute an order protection and safety protection, which provide for the order and safety of the population regarding natural events, by which I mean events of nature. The races and their peoples themselves live in an order, which has no degenerations, like this is the case with the people on Earth.
What to me is still of interest, dear friend, is their technology of locomotion. Do they have also still such primitive airplanes and automobiles, etc., like we on Earth? This is certainly to be assumed if they have the technological position, which we possessed in 1968, am I correct?
Your assumption is not entirely correct, because certainly they have a similar technology of locomotion, but the drives are not sustained by explosion motors using benzene and diesel oil, but they are driven with synthetic substances. All three races and all of their peoples do not exploit the petroleum of the world. All necessary substances for all things are from plants of many kinds, as well as produced synthetically.
And the food?
There exist large community gardens as well as joint farming holdings, like gardens and small farms, which, however, are also run by individual persons or small groups. And before you ask, there are economically useful animals kept and bred for work and for food purposes, though, however, any form of cruelty to animals is taboo. Flesh for food of humans is solely produced through breeding and slaughtering of certain animals. Fruits, vegetables, and flesh of many and diverse forms, as well as all other necessary food items and required products of other kinds, are in abundance and plentiful, and from this follows that nowhere does famine exist. All bodies of waters and forests, meadows, fields, and marsh areas are healthy and completely intact. Chemical products are not laid down for the purposes of protection or growth of plants, but only substances, which in turn consist of natural products. Hunting for any wild game is taboo, because game flesh is likewise only produced through breeding, like this also is the case with fish flesh, etc.
Have you also established how old the humans get to be?
Naturally. The average age of the humans of all three races is a uniform 128 years, and death as a rule is due to old age.
So they are also much ahead of the Earthlings in this respect. But what happens to the deceased human beings? I mean, how are they laid to rest, cremated or buried, etc.?
The deceased are laid out upon a stone bed far away from residential areas in especially created for them. Individual small, yet very stable stone houses, after which the entrance is closed with rocks and boulders. After that, the deceased are left to decompose.
Do you mean by this something like a vault? Is it with the bereaved then also, as is usual on Earth, that they visit these tombs?
No, this does not likewise belong to tradition, as well as also not the decoration of tombs with flowers, etc. Also, no inscriptions are displayed and no ritual at all is indulged in at the burial. Among all races exists also no fear of dying and death. The whole thing is considered and honored as a natural and inevitable event.
Contact Report 350.
Aha, it happens all the time, day or night, that one of you is in my office. I always notice this when the chair is moved or the computer is turned on, when I come back into my office. The CD player is also used and all kinds of music are listened to. Maybe they even make phone calls, maybe to Era or something. Sometimes you can also smell quite lovely scents in the office, which I suppose can be traced back to some of the lovely girls?
We all feel very comfortable in your workroom, but also in the whole area around the center, where we often go for a walk or a stroll and enjoy it.
And what about our people when they are out on the grounds, such as on the night watch?
That means no more difficulties for us, neither by day nor by night. Our security devices and camouflage devices have been developed in such a way that we can move around in the immediate vicinity of the group members without being noticed by them, even during the day. However, we may be heard walking around if we are not wearing footwear that muffles the sound of footsteps. Also, certain sensitive group members may be able to perceive our vibrations when we are sufficiently close to them. However, none of us use your telephones because we would not know who to call. However, several of us have already thought that through these devices we could call you in the living quarters if one of us is here in your workroom and wants to speak to you. But we did not dare to do so, because if someone other than you were to make the connection through the apparatus, we would not know what to do. But the whole thing would also be just a joke on our part.
Contact Report 352.
But look here. These chocolates were given to me by Marianne, and I promised her that we would both enjoy them together. As a chocolate tiger, I do not suppose you would say no to that, would you?
Certainly not. Please allow me. But they are really very delicious. Send my heartfelt and dear thanks to Marianne. We will be careful with them.
It is not necessary, Ptah, because I can get some again.
Nevertheless, we will be thrifty.
But now I understand what Ptah meant about the chocolate here. Please help yourself, because you both like sweets of this kind.
Thank you, I'm so free. But this is very delicious. Thank you very much.
Really excellent. The chocolate is so tender and fine and exceptionally good in taste. Thank you.
We have not had chocolate for a long time.
Contact Report 357.
Our great federation, which encompasses a measure of distance of 48,000 light years.
Contact Report 362.
Well, the thing is this. Last Wednesday, it was the evening of the 30th of June, Silvano drove the old Volvo to the garage car park to park. And since I had something to talk to Silvano about, I went there, seeing various marks on the bonnet of Atlan's car, so I asked Silvano what had happened. His answer was that he knew nothing, while I went to the car to take a closer look at the supposed scratch marks. When I got closer, I first saw that they were small finger and hand prints that were on the bonnet. Hands that had 6 fingers and a thumb, or 7 fingers. Of course, it was immediately clear to me that alien visitors must have been here. Some Trilans who had probably examined Atlan's car somewhat handily because the handprints were etched into the first layer of paint, as were the papillary lines, as Silvano and I quickly discovered. The prints of the delicate hands were clear and distinct. So I was of the opinion that the whole thing must have happened just that day, around noon, because Silvano and I saw a silver disc-shaped object fly away at 11:17 hours. Of course, we then showed the handprints to all the members who came to the center, so also to Philia. This proved my view wrong, as she explained that she had already seen the tracks sometime over the weekend and wondered what it was all about. Since her observation, however, it had rained several times in veritable torrents. But this did not harm the etched handprints, because they remained unchanged. Of course, everyone asked me which aliens could leave such traces, etc., so I explained that it could only be the small and about 110 to 120 centimeters tall and green-colored, as well as completely hairless and absolutely human Trilans, which I had been allowed to see 3 times so far. Twice in your giant spacecraft, and once here in the center or on the front storage area. And of course they wanted to know how the chemical burn could have come about, which is why I explained that these small human beings have a light green skin that is covered with a thin film of acid, which has a slightly corrosive effect. And now, because the rascals were leaning on the bonnet and also otherwise touching Atlan's car, The handprints and the papillary lines were etched into the paint. For my part, as you know, I cannot reach out to the little ones or I will cauterize them. Nevertheless, you also know that I briefly touched the arm of one of these trilons with my middle finger in your spacecraft, after which I felt a burning sensation like stinging nettles for about 18 hours, while my finger was reddened for almost 3 weeks.
Contact Report 364.
Regarding the alien artifacts that will one day be found on Mars by the Earthlings, can you tell me what these discoveries are about?
The discoveries made in more distant times by terrestrials on the planet Mars are usually only artifacts that were created by human influence in various Martian rocks and are often misunderstood as human work of art.
A short and concise answer. Then everything will not be of great importance and nothing earth-shattering.
Contact Report 365.
Then I would like to play another game of chess, if you like. My need is there.
Of course.
I am also thirsty. If you can offer me something.
I have some mineral water outside the office entrance, or ginger ale, which you already drank. I can also offer you dark chocolate.
I would like to have ginger ale and some chocolate.
Your wish is my command. Just a moment.
Contact Report 367.
Also with regard to UFOs, which are supposed to be of extraterrestrial origin, but which are in fact of earthly origin, I have learned a great deal through your help, and have gained knowledge which proves that on Earth everything in this respect is usually based on faith and delusion, as well as on the machinations of lies, deception, charlatanry, tricks, deception and illusion, but also on imagination, deception, and self-generated visions, etc. Also regarding many UFOs, you have proved to me that they are not of extraterrestrial, but purely earthly origin. Power states of the Earth, like especially the USA, England, Canada, and Russia, have been consciously organizing deception maneuvers since the 30s by carrying out secret test flights with new and futuristic airplanes and other flying objects. They continue to do so without informing the public, which leads to the belief that the planes and other aircraft are alien spaceships. So the governmental secrecy consciously continues to fuel the belief of the population that the UFOs are spacecraft of alien visitors or intruders, which is of course absolute nonsense, because extraterrestrial flying machines can only be observed very rarely on Earth. Thus, mankind is led by the state powers and secret services, as well as by the secret research forces with regard to the UFOs by the nose. Alien visitors, if I disregard you, are so rare that they are to be looked for like a needle in a haystack. That was different when you still had fixed stations on our world. But that is long gone now, and therefore alien aircraft can only be observed very rarely. But the fact that Earth people continue to claim that they have any contact with extraterrestrials or spirit forms, etc., whether physical, telepathic, or channeling, etc., that is simply senseless swindling, delusion, schizophrenia, charlatanry, or even lies and deceit, because for several decades there has been no such contact whatsoever, if I disregard our permanent contact. At least this is how I have been oriented by you. But exactly this fact is denied by all kinds of believers or know-it-alls, and by so-called experts, because everything that is lies, nonsense, deceit, fraud and charlatanry is accepted by scientists, believers, know-it-alls and so-called experts as real and effective reality, believed and declared in this form as truth. Not only with regard to UFOs, but also with regard to telepathy, telekinesis, levitation, and teleportation. But in contrast to this, all that is real and effective reality and truth and reasonable, normal and conclusive for logical thinkers, is slandered and denied as lies, deception, charlatanry, and swindling. And those few who have accepted telepathy, telekinesis, levitation and teleportation, etc., are denied as truth, are really mastered and can be counted on one hand, are humiliated, ridiculed, and trampled into the ground by skeptics, ignorant critics, know-it-alls of all kinds, as well as by slander and lies. But now the real question. What can you explain about all this?
We and our allies of our Federation have been the only strangers to the Earth for a long time, who come to this planet and maintain contact with a person of this world, and that is you alone. But that has its own special reason, as you yourself know very well. But it is precisely this fact that has led to you and us being slandered and attacked and insulted by lies since the beginning of our contacts. The pathologically inclined troublemakers, slanderers, and other malicious people in this respect are, however, so lacking in intelligence that they cannot think far enough to recognize the real reality and truth. They are not able to recognize that the alleged messages of alleged extraterrestrials given by alleged contact persons are so stupid and banal that they originate from nothing but a completely illogical and usually religious sectarian fantasy. In fact, we know nothing of these alleged contact persons and their messages from alleged extraterrestrials, etc., that corresponds to truth and logic. It must also be said that if contacts had ever actually existed in such a way that important messages or a teaching had been transmitted, these would then have continued until the end of the lives of the contact persons concerned and not simply been broken off. Such an action would be completely illogical, because if some beings set out from the vastness of the universe to a planet to bring messages and a teaching, then this is not just a trivial religious sectarian nonsense or the like, which is then also ended after a short time. If it really is true that contacts between Earth people and Earth strangers come about with regard to messages and a teaching, then such contacts are not simply broken off again unless there are compelling reasons for breaking them off. Other individual contacts, which are unexpectedly brought about simply by chance, are based only on brief encounters, which, however, are of no significance and are not connected with any mission. Real contacts between terrestrial people and terrestrial strangers, as is the case with us, lead to a lifelong connection and to a lifelong and immense work. And that in our case, you alone are our only contact person on Earth has its own special reason, as you yourself know very well. You are, in fact, in every respect, the only person on Earth whom we can meet physically and with whom we can maintain telepathic contact without any mental damage. This also means that it is impossible for us to make contact with other Earth people, so we cannot make any other connections, except through you as a mediator. And should it be that in the coming time other alien beings find their way to Earth in such a way that they establish open contact with earthly humanity, then we will withdraw definitively into our space-time structure because our directives are aligned in this form. But I have already explained this to you on previous visits and conversations.
Yes, I know. Also good. But you are talking again about aliens coming to Earth. Is that going to happen in the foreseeable future? For my part, I thought that due to the extremely negative circumstances of humanity on Earth, this would no longer be the case for the time being.
Your train of thought is also correct, because we do not know anything for the foreseeable future about alien beings coming to Earth to establish open contact with earthly mankind.
But your flash forwards?
They only exist in this relationship until the end of the year 2004, because for us the appearance of alien beings is only then of importance when they actually visit the Earth in order to get in open contact with earthly humanity. But that will not be the case so very quickly. Those who were originally supposed to come here will in any case no longer appear, because through secret visits and clarifications, on Earth they became aware of all the evil and negativity that is especially driven by those responsible for the state and their followers, as well as by the earthly population. They were thus deterred, and the decision was made that contacts with earthly humanity should not be made, so that the evil and negativity of earthly humanity could not spread to their humanity. Thus, if it is to be that one day extraterrestrial intelligences openly contact humanity on Earth, they will be other beings whose mentality, technology, and science, etc. We know neither their state of evolution with regard to the observance of creative laws, nor their state of evolution. Nor do we know anything about their social laws and regulations, etc.
Then there may come some unpleasant surprise.
This possibility is given, but it should not be expected.
Of course not. Would be idiotic and would be completely in line with the bullshit that has been practiced in the worst form since the entertainment film industry was founded. Because all films that are based on aliens assume and are designed in such a way that aliens are only evil and degenerate.